Hello. Is there humour in the Bible? Most people say no. I say, ha ha ha, yes. The comedian George Burns was interviewed on the occasion of his 100th birthday. I see you have a cigar, George. How many of those do you smoke a day? 4 or 5. And how many martinis a day do you drink? 5 or 6. What does your doctor think about that? He's dead. What made that funny? George Burns' raspy monotone would seem a hindrance rather than a help. What's more, each of his answers was as brief as possible. He could have said he died long ago or he's been dead a while. But it's clear here that every unnecessary word is a dead weight. And George Burns wouldn't have survived as a comedian if it had taken him 100 years to learn that. The Bible contains a lot of humour too, contrary to popular belief. But it's hard to transfer humour across language and cultural barriers. For one thing, translations very often end up increasing the number of words, especially if they're trying to bring out all the details of meaning. So that might bring out all the details of meaning, but it might not do very good for the humour. In an effort to avoid this problem and to give you a hope and insight into the tone of the original, here is a translation of John the Baptist's replies to the Pharisees about who he was, using in each case the same number of words as in the Greek. Don't worry, I'm only half serious. So these are his replies. I am not the Christ. That's John chapter 1 verse 20. They ask him again and he says, I'm not, just 2 words this time. And then at the end of that verse, they get a 1-word reply, which I've translated, nope. At this stage, his questioners got a bit frustrated. Well, who are you then? We've got to give some answer to the people who sent us, which brought the reply, a voice. I am merely a voice. And we picture the gruff, coarsely dressed prophet with his sophisticated townie interviewers almost dancing in frustration around him. But it's true, we today suffer from a horrible misconception that true religion means being truly serious and dull. I was at a shared meal once in someone's house. People were talking and laughing until they heard, right, let's say grace. Everyone quickly went silent. And in serious, stilted tones, someone prayed. Right after the Amen, the happy noise all started again. On another occasion, in a different church, I noticed the difference between 2 speakers in the morning and evening of the same Sunday. The morning speaker was pious and dull, whereas the evening speaker used humour all the way through. Now, here are a couple of serious questions. Which one of these 2 better reflected what God is like? And which one better showed what God wants us to be like? Well, as evangelicals, we take the Bible as the guide on these things. What do we read in it? And here's an interesting quote from a woman named Dorothy Sayers, who wrote a book, The Man Born to be King. She said, if we did not know his retorts by heart, if we had not taken the sting out of them by incessant repetition in the accents of the pulpit, we would recognize him, Jesus, among the greatest wits of all time. Very interesting comment. Well, in addition, we may ask, what is faith? Well, one thing that is opposite to faith is worry. Worry is shown in gloom and heavy-heartedness. Therefore, the purest and truest faith is shown in joy and laughter. Not just empty laughter, but laughter from a carefree heart, which knows that the Father's hand of protection and supply never fails, and sees that the Father has a sense of humour too. My particular interest is in Bible translation, and I want to give a few more examples of the wit that I have found contained in the Greek and Hebrew Bibles that too often fails to come over in our English translations. When the blind lead the blind, everyone falls into the ditch. Matthew chapter 15, verse 14. Compare this with a recently published translation. And if one blind person guides another, both will fall into a pit, which is carefully word for word accurate, but, in my view anyway, rather clumsy and unfunny. The rhythm and symmetry and the agile wording seen in the Greek have disappeared. Small points like choice of words are vital too, asked George Burns. A pit is pedantically correct, but the ditch is just waiting for them. The most vital thing in translating here is that it must go bang, 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 not burble, burble, burble. And a translation cannot be called accurate if it fails to convey the spirit of the original. Okay, wordplays. Wordplays are common in the Bible, and their effect is often humorous, but again, they are usually lost in translation. But here's an example. In Proverbs 21:19, we read, "Better to live out in the Midbar desert than with the Mizwanim nagging wife." So you see, the similarity of these two words is part of the wordplay, and unfortunately that's lost in English. No English version I know of has tried to do anything for this. And again, we have translations that are accurate in one sense, but in a larger sense, quite unfaithful to the original, aiding and abetting the widespread myth that God is dull, humorless, and glum. Another example, Genesis 26:8. Word for word, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of his window, and behold, Isaacing Rebekah, his wife. One of several places in Genesis where Isaac's name is used in a wordplay. But mindful of the tone, a translator's word choice can do a lot. And this is my suggestion. Abimelech, king of the Philistines, on looking out of his window, one day was greeted with the sight of Isaac caressing Rebekah, his wife. So a bit of a surprise to him, and at this distance, reading this account, we can laugh. This, incidentally, is typical of the wry style of humour common in the Bible. An American once told me that New Zealanders and Australians shouldn't have cultural problems understanding it, since they go in for the same kind of humour. And note the wry play on Joseph's name in Genesis 37:5, which literally says, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more, where all the more uses Joseph's name. His name means more. That was his mother's prayer when he was born, and the prayer was answered with the conception of Benjamin. She wanted more sons. As I searched for a translation to capture the spirit of it here, I thought of, they hated him more than he ever dreamt. So, you see, I've transferred the wordplay to the word dream. He dreamt, and they hated him more than he ever dreamt. Little joke there. So, don't laugh at the claim that the Bible contains humour. It's often to be found where you hadn't even dreamt it was. One Further example, a subtle piece that I had passed my eyes over perhaps hundreds of times but missed until I read Wenham's excellent commentary on Genesis, is the brothers' remark to Joseph, the now Egyptian prince, whom they failed to recognize. We are all sons of one man. Truer than they realized. They thought they were just talking about we, but not Joseph. But we, which is ambiguous in English as in Hebrew, could mean the hearer is included, or it could not mean that the hearer is included. When they said this, they were not meaning that the hearer Joseph was included. Unbeknown to them, the hearer Joseph was included. He was their brother. You must visualize the arching of Joseph's eyebrows at these words and the quickly suppressed smile. The wordplay is actually lost in translation into Pacific Island languages, which have several words for we and are forced to be specific and remove the ambiguity between the brothers intended we and not you, and the unbeknown to them true we all, including you. Truly, translation is a ticklish business. Although things do vary a little from culture to culture, there are certain stock situations that are widely regarded as funny. They have to be described using appropriate words and phrases which will differ a bit from language to language. The blind man and his guide falling into a ditch is a slapstick kind of humour. Related to this is a situation where the authorities or experts are mistaken. We see this in Acts 12:14-16, where the disciples, engrossed in prayers for Peter in prison, dispute a humble slave girl's testimony that he was standing right at the door. So here is my attempt at a translation. Rhoda recognized Peter's voice, but in her joy, she forgot to open the door. She ran back into the room where the disciples were praying and blurted, "Peter's at the door." "You're crazy," they said. "He is," she insisted. "Can't be. Must be his angel," they said. Peter, all the while, kept knocking. Finally, they opened the door and saw for themselves. They were amazed. And here is a rich man in an undignified position. "Hurry down, Zacchaeus. I have to stay at your place today." The miraculous food provided for the Israelites in Exodus 16 was given the name, "What's that?" by ancient Hebrew humorists. After hearing that phrase often repeated, the people said, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" So they called it, "What's that?" But the joke is lost when the word is copied straight over into English as manna. Now it just sounds serious, respectable, and religious. But manna in Hebrew just means, "What's that?" So, let's finish with one of Jesus' jokes again. When the blind lead the blind, everyone falls into the ditch. I'm sure that when he heard this, Peter practically rolled into the ditch himself, laughing so much. Why not join him? We might lose our dignity, but gain our sense of humour.